Welcome to 61C, Lecture 2. Talking about numbers today. We're turning the mic on also. One handout always at the entrance. This is a great book, History of Numbers. You should check it out. Normally I'd spend this time talking about technology, but this book is too good. Let's jump right in. In review, you saw Mike talking about the great ideas in computer architecture. We're going to see all of those. And remember, this is just our list. This isn't the official in stone, but these are the things that we really think about, have been we'll be able to cover this year. And key things, what's nice is it's not like, well, there are 12 of them, but 61C folks are only ready for 6. There are just 6 that we can come up with, and we're teaching you all 6. So it's kind of cool that you're getting it all here at a sophomore level course. Anybody a freshman here? Sometimes people come in with a lot of credit. Anyway, so welcome everybody. There was a note on Piazza. Hopefully you guys know about Piazza. I subscribed you all. If you don't, go to piazza.com, subscribe for 61C. That's an important piece. And about prerequisites, I'll talk about prerequisites at the break. So putting out perspective, Robert Kringley, who's a technology columnist, talks about the development of the computer. We talk about Moore's Law. This is all relevant to Moore's Law, and says if the automobile had followed the same development cycle as the computer, a Rolls-Royce would cost $100, get 1 million miles to gallon, and explode once a year, killing everyone inside. I love this quote. So really, there was a slide you saw on Friday that talked about reliability, and we may decide, moving forward, you may see computer engineering and systems engineering moving to a place where all of that redundancy means that we have a ton of extra transistors we could use for the computer. Why don't we have that redundancy set up in a way that if a hardware failure is to occur, the redundancy will mean that you don't see it. It just somehow happens, meaning you're taking a minor performance hit, but a huge reliability hit. We may see that moving forward. The catch is that many errors that you see are software problems, and the amount of hardware redundancy doesn't help that, and that's kind of a software problem, but we'll talk about that. So we're thinking about numbers, and the key piece for numbers is data input. Thank you. So what we've got is the world is analog. Really, the world is analog, okay? Every sound you hear, every smell you have, every taste you have, every sight you see is an analog sight. Even if it's projected digitally, you're seeing it in an analog domain, which is how your eye is perceiving it. So, thank you very much, my friend. You're awesome. Thank you so much. So, here's the key. You have to import that or convert it to digital, okay, if you ever want to have it in the system. Once you've done that, that's awesome. The converted digital is a two-step process. One, you sample it. You may have not heard this idea, but you ask yourself, how does this CD hold Jimi Hendrix's greatest hits? Well, they took his analog tracks, which was the amount of magnetic slurry, the amount of magnetic field on this little tape. That's a slurry of magnetic charge. And what happens is they sample it. They say, every 1,100 times a second, we're going to ask it, how loud are you? How loud are you? How loud are you? And that translates, back in the analog days, those were how much the speaker was moving in and out. And so we're sampling that, okay? And then we say, well, you give me some number. I am 12.964321923, units of loudness. I now have to quantize that. That's a second new word you may not have seen before, which is you decide how many stages or how many bits you're going to allocate for that loudness, okay? And we're going to see that in discussion this week, understanding how the current conversion from bits to the number of things you can store. So once you've done that, you now have pure digital data. It's been sampled, it's been quantized, you have it, and you're ready to go. You're ready to process it. Print it to CD, analyze it using DSP, or sending it illegally to your friends. So now, there's pieces that people always remember, but Dan, don't forget, not all data is born analog. Some data is born digital. We have the wonder of Pixar and Lucasfilm and DreamWorks and other animation folks who are putting together worlds that never exist in the real world. They are pure fabrications, and here are two beautiful scenes from a Pavre renderer, and these are beautiful things that have never existed aside from the artist's eye, and they are born digital, and that artist can say, I want to take that image, and I want to render this scene. It's in object space, which means it's in floating point numbers, and I want to render it to 2,000 by 3,000, or 200,000 by 300,000, and you'll just get more resolution of that in the way that they store the geometry of that. So it's really very cool that data lives inside the computer. A lot of data lives inside, and you can now render that to however big you want to render it, and that's really cool. And that's been useful, by the way, moving to Blu-ray from the older days. If you had the old film, you have to then rescan it on a higher scanner. But in the Pixar world, you just say, here's the geometry, just send it to the render farm at a higher res, and bam, there's your Blu-ray output. So it's kind of cool that when things live in the digital domain, you can just render them to whatever resolution you need. The big idea, if you walk away from this lecture knowing one thing, just, Dan, what's the one key thing that I need to learn? It's that bits can be anything. That's a really powerful idea. The powerful idea that I told you on the first slide, that you can convert anything to bits, that's how to move analog data to there, but also that from the other side, from the abstraction point of view, you can use bits to abstract anything, like literally anything. Let's see, letters in the alphabet, let's say it's simple, 26 of them. So 5 bits for that, because 2 to the 5 is 32, so that's in the range of things I can do. How about upper and lower case? Well, there's 8 bits for ASCII. Well, let's say you want to cover the world's languages. Well, you now have different formats of Unicode, and you can go up to 32 bits of Unicode. Now you can represent all the letters and all the characters in all the world's languages. That's really cool and really powerful, and you're kind of like hitting yourself over the head. Yes, you should have thought of this back then when you were designing ASCII, but they were just getting something working, and they spent a lot of time designing ASCII. Don't let me try to stomp on all the design work, but they didn't account for the fact that it is the first letter of ASCII is American, right? The world is bigger than just American, and that's not going to work for an email from here to China. They're like, what are these letters? We don't have letters. What are you talking about? So that doesn't help. The world was not as flat back then. Logical values, obviously, 1 bit is true or false, on and off with a light switch. Colors, obviously, you can encode colors this way. Addresses, commands, anything. The key thing to memorize on this slide is that n bits gives you at most 2 to the n things. Circle that, make sure that's in, like literally. Put that, we talk in CS620C, I've taught this course quite a few times, about things that are tat-worthy. Things that you could actually go to the Cow Palace and the body image thing where you can get tattoos on the body. That line, n bits is 2 to n things, is literally tat-worthy. That is such a fundamental rule of law in the world that is not going to change, folks. N bits where a bit has 2 levels. Some bits in the future may have more than 2 states. But for us, bits have 2 states, therefore we get 2 to the n things. So now, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to plug my clicker in. This is where you get yourself. Go to your web clicker, log in. By the way, I don't know if you heard this good news, but you can use the clicker from your laptop. So if you don't have a smartphone, if you have the old school, not so smartphone, what do they call them? Do they call them dumb phones? Is that the right word? I don't know what the thing is, but not a smartphone. You're welcome to go into AirBears, launch web clicker from that, and I will launch this guy. We're going to have our first clicker session, including the web clicker. This is exciting. Okay, so get out of here. Dan, stop talking. Launch your web clicker stuff. All right. So iClicker is here. I then choose Fall 2001 Great Ideas of Architecture. Start a session. Here we go. So exciting. Okay, so here we go. Let's try this now. How many bits represent pi? This is a floating window, so I can keep it up while I'm doing this. I will drag the window down, maybe this bottom left, right corner here. And now I'm going to start. 330 students are so ready to pump. Ready? Go! Come on. Yes, it works. Oh, I love it. I hope many of you are clicking on your web and it's actually working. So those of you with your laptops up, I totally bless technology. Get your smartphones, get your internet-enabled devices, get your iClickers, and rock on that vote. We should have 330, and we're going to stay here till we get it. No, I don't know. We'll see how we do for that one. I'll wait a little bit of time. You're thinking about it, because there's also the thought process. So we got that going. You'll see it in a second. The question was, can you see the distribution, the histogram? I can see it, but you're not supposed to see it. Okay. So let's keep going. I usually stop when the numbers start to settle down. But keep on voting. Maybe it takes a second for the web. I did say this is a web clicker-enabled course. In theory, that's going to work. Question in the front. No, not if you have a, sorry, I'll clarify. If you have a normal clicker, old school clicker, this is a RF receiver, it gets it. This little antenna is getting your stuff. If you have a web clicker, which is cheaper option, it's $10 for a half a year, then you need to have internet access to get that. Or 3G, 4G, through your cell phone. Okay. 119, all right. Remember, this is part of your grade, folks, so keep in mind that API is part of your grade and clickers factors into that. So you do want to get a clicker to factor into that. That's kind of free points that you're giving up. Okay. So now we say stop, 1, 2, 3, 120, stabilizing. All right, going once, going twice. Now, here's the best part. This is the key to peer instruction. turn to your neighbor and not so loudly because there's 400 people in the room. Talk about what you voted and why you voted that and try to convince them of your idea. When we come back, you're going to have to hold hands and vote as a team. So you still vote individually, but I want you to have the same vote after this discussion, okay? Go. Talk about why you voted what you did, and there, go. Love it. Okay, so let's come on back. Let's vote again. This is the fun part. Now remember, you are voting, you are holding hands, you are singing Kumbaya, and you are voting together. Ready? Kumbaya. No, come on, here we go. I have a harmonica. Can I play that? Does that work? How's Kumbaya go? That's good, right? All right. Maybe. Very good. Maybe I'll give you a new song every time. All right. So how are we doing? 108, 120 is my number. Key number, come on. 120, come on. It's like waiting for the stock market to climb up. Come on, I got to sell. All right. And how are we doing? Oh, look at this. Very interesting. So here's what we got. This is question 1, and this is question 2. And basically, the infinity people started to win out. You notice this here, right? Look at that. That's very interesting. The right answer, folks, is A. And the reason it's A, this is an important idea. I have 1 bit. Is it pi or not? You're going to laugh, but we use number representation to actually represent the value of infinity. Like when numbers get too big, we actually have a bit representation that says, now it's infinity. How would you know how many bits for infinity? Right? So 1 bit. The answer is 1 bit. It's infinity. Actually 2, plus and negative. Isn't that kind of cool? So the answer is, it is 1 for a reason. Learn from that lesson. Okay, by the way, this is a meta point. You don't get points off for a wrong answer. If you clicked, you get the points for clicking. I'm only care that you vote. I don't care actually how you vote. That said, I want you to try to vote the right way, but I do care that you learn. So now you've got numbers that represent a question. Sorry.
To know that bit actually means whether there's a pi or not.
Yeah.
Would it be extra bits so you could store the information?
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't need to know. The question was, don't you need support bits to know that that's pi or not? No, I have a single light switch. Is the length of this wire in pi or not? When it happens to be there, the light goes on. When it's not pi, it's there. I don't have any. I know semantically that that's what that bit means. I don't have to have it there. Question.
What do you do once you actually want to know what the number pi is? You want to start after?
Oh, that's a whole different issue. If you actually want to kind of calculate that pi, that requires an infinite number of bits. That's right. But just to say, this is pi, it's just a bit. Okay? Good. I could see the argument for infinity, but really I wanted to get to the point of the A. Okay? What do you do when you have numbers? Once you have them, you can munge with them. You can add, subtract, multiply, divide. You can do logical operations on them. It's wonderful. So check this out. This is a binary representation of 2 numbers, 10 and 7. You're going to get fast enough, with the help of discussion, you're going to get fast enough at looking at nibbles. Ooh, new word. Nibble is 4 bits together. A byte, get it? Byte is 8 bits, and a nibble is like half of it. That's a nibble. I couldn't finish it. I'm sorry. I'm stuck. So a nibble is 4 bits. You're going to quickly have, out of 621C, my graduate 621C, I take great pride in it. You guys see a nibble and you say, oh, 10, 7, immediately. There's only 16 to memorize. They're pretty easy. I want you to memorize those, okay? So 10 plus 7 should be 17. And when you do it in binary and you add and you carry, you know how you have to carry, I'll see this cursor here for people on the screencast. 1 plus 1 is 2, right? 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 in binary is 1, 0. So that's a 0, carry the 1. Get it? 1 plus 0 plus 1 is 2, 0 carry the 1, etc. See? And that number is 17. So it just works. It all just works. Math is so cool that it just works. There's no extra stuff. So in terms of this, by the way, has no negative numbers. So in terms of what we call unsigned, I haven't introduced a sign there, plus or negative, but unsigned math just works beautifully. It's really very nice that way. So I can subtract also. How would you tell if a number is bigger than the other number? I have two numbers, x and y. Here's a lot of bits, and then a lot of bits. Which is bigger? Using unsigned numbers. Anybody have a sense of that? Yes? Yeah, the guy that has the most energy on the left side. You kind of stack them up, and the guy who's longer on the left side. There's obviously leading zeros that you get, but the leading most one, which is bigger. If those are the tie, then you keep working back recursively, right? Just the same way you do with real numbers, okay? With base 10 numbers, I should say. So now, what if they're too big, okay? Well, the reality is numbers are infinite. The amount of bits you have is finite. So the mapping of this actual number space to what we represent is an abstraction. Okay, we're going to abstractly represent some subset of all the numbers we possibly could represent. Okay, so numbers have an infinite number of digits. We normally don't show the leading digits, as I said. So if I have 3, I'm just going to show you 1, 1. I'm not going to show you 30 zeros if I have a 32-bit number, and then 2. I'll just say 1, 1 to make it easy for you. Okay, if I need to close this Dropboxy thing. If you ever run over the number of bits you have. The number, I'm storing a number, and I'm storing how much money I have. And I have 16 cents, and now I have 15 cents. And now I only have, in this case, I'm going to have 5 bits, right? What's the biggest number I have with 5 bits? 31, right? It's 0 to 31, 32 total numbers, 0 to 31. So, now I have 30 cents. Now I have 31 cents, and now if I only have 5 bits, doing it in a naive way, give me another penny, and wait, I had 0 again? Huh? And that's actually what happens in the system. The system wraps around just like an odometer on a car. Think of what we call the binary odometer. I have 5 bits, all ones or zeros in each of the bits, and now my biggest mileage I can ever drive is 31 miles. I drive another mile, I'm now 32, but it wraps around, and it's now 0. Okay? Everybody know why that is in a kind of meta sense? Because really, 32 is a 6-bit number with a 1 and a lot of zeros. So why does it look like it wrapped around? Because go. Yeah, the leading one gets stored. I'm only looking at the lowest 5. It's really, there's a number out there in some bits, and I'm actually only storing, my odometer is only ever giving me the lowest 5. So in a way, I'll give you a new word, it's like I'm masking out. Like I kind of put a mask, covering up with a marker all the other digits, and I'm only keeping the lowest 5 digits, okay? That's why it overlaps. How about if I go small? If I was subtracting money from my thing, okay, so now let's take money out of my account. Well, I have 2 cents, take a penny out, 1 cent, take a penny out, 0 cents, take a penny out, guess what? 31 cents! So try that in your account now. Go to 0, and then subtract a whole bunch of money and see if all of a sudden you don't have you own the world, right? Wouldn't that be great? Do we call that underflow, or do we call that something? It's underflow, right? That makes sense, right? Overflow is the big side. Underflow, right? Because over, under. That makes sense, right? Nods of heads. I gotcha. I love getting you guys. This is great. It's called negative overflow. It's still called overflow, but it's called negative overflow, okay? So it means you wrap around. So it's still overflow, but you wrap around. That's why the arrows, here's a hint, the arrows on both sides, still called overflow, right? So that's the idea of overflow. You can't store it. So now we got an issue. There's negative numbers out there, but we got to store them. So what do? So to store negative numbers, we could do a very simple thing. And our simplest model is to just introduce a sign, right? So far, we call them unsigned numbers. By the way, here's a cool piece of this. Watch this. As I increment my binary odometer, let's now think in my own representation, I've got these bits. Let me just start incrementing them and what number I'm actually representing as I do that. So let's start from 0 and move up. What happens? The numbers go up nicely, right? It just seamlessly. They start from 0, work their way to the top, and then they wrap, as we saw, okay? So the obvious solution is well, Dan, you want negative numbers, just borrow a bit from somebody, from somewhere, And so let's steal a bit from our representation. 5 bits I've got. Let's steal a bit. Borrow the leftmost bit for now. And let's make it 0 and 1, which tells me whether I'm positive or negative. Make it to be easy, let's have 0 be positive and 1 be negative. By making 0 be positive, the numbers all zeros through 15, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, is the same as unsigned. So that's the nice advantage of keeping 0 in the leading bit B meaning positive, because it means 0 through the first 16 guys are the same in both representations. I like that. But watch what happens to my odometer. Here we go. Watch. Goes there, and then what happens? Ooh. Now, those of you, I believe, on the screencast are not going to see that animation because it's like a 1 frame every 3 seconds, so you'll see it jump. But anyway, the line grew to the right and then grew to the left. The line went the wrong way. As I was incrementing my odometer, I was actually getting more negative, rather than kind of wrapping and going more positive, which seems more natural. As you know, I'm adding something to my odometer. Shouldn't I always go up? But no, sometimes that means I'm going down. So we don't like that, okay? We don't like that going down thing. Now, here's a great story. I love this story to tell, and I hope I have enough time, which is this king once asked his wise men to go away and return and summarize all of economics. The king didn't know about economics, but he figured ruling a kingdom, you need to know about economics. So these wise men went away. It took a year, and they came back with 3 massive volumes and say, "Ah, sir," and they were groveling in the head, and they were, and they said, we kowtowing, and they said, "We have produced," with the long beards, right? We look like Merlin, right? And they said, "We have produced the 3 volumes that summarizes all of economics into these 3. If you read these," he said, king says, "No time, no time, no time. Make it smaller." He goes like, "Huh?" So they go back and they rip the books up and they try to water it down more. And we have this one comic book that describes all of economics. You just read this comic book. It's fun, nice pictures. You'll get. The king goes back and says, "No time, no time. Make it smaller." They're like, "Well, we're going to go to that limit." They come back and they're like, "Ah!" And now they're all. I mean, at this point, they lost their hair, the whiter, and they're bent over more in the back. And they say to the king, "We have summarized all of economics into 4 words. Ain't no free lunch." And that's it. That's the story. The story is, that really does summarize all of economics. You can't get something for free. And it's beautiful when it comes into 621C world. Because to get the negative numbers, it ain't no free lunch. We had to do what? We had to take a hit somewhere. We can't get something for free. So where was our hit? We can't go as big on the positive side. Do you see that? Before I could do 31, now I can only do 15. So I had to give something to get something. Ain't no free lunch. You're going to see it over and over and over when we talk about representations of things and borrowing bits from here to pay there. But it's always a zero-sum game in that. So sign magnitude we like. Simple, right? 1 bit for the sign. The magnitude is easy. So sign and magnitude, 2 pieces of it. You're kind of slicing the number into 2 different representations. Well, to build this was hard, partly because of that. When you add 1, sometimes you're going up and sometimes you're going down. Also, the biggest deal was 2 zeros. That was really, really bad. So not only is it hard to build circuitry to do this, but the 2-0 was killing it. It was basically a deal breaker. So we said that's not going to work. So they actually gave it up. So it's kind of more of a historical piece. All right, now we're halfway through, perfectly halfway through here. So the next lecture is going to be Intro to C. Our lab this week is Intro to C, kind of a hello worldy thing. And your first homework due on Sunday is Intro to C. Lab overcrowding, I haven't heard an official word on the opening of that new section, but I hope to hear by the end of this day because you start that new section tomorrow because it would be Tuesday. So I need to call the guy after this. Maybe we should call him now. We should call Michael David and see if there's any word on that. I think it's 36002. Let's give him a call. 643-6002. Let's call him and see if we can get real time whether there's any word on that. Because email might have come in right now that I didn't check because I was at class and at lunch there. So it might have happened. Okay. So have our tea. Right now we're calling this what's that called? A lifeline. We're getting the lifeline. We're calling to see if we have that. There's a meta point which you can go to any discussion, and that's important. You can go to all the discussions. People say, "Do you have to match?" In the best case, you match. So the same TA knows your student in lab and in discussion. But in the worst case, you can't make a match. We'll live with it. The reality is discussion's open. Discussion is always going to be a review of material. It very seldom is going to be new material. So it's always going to be clarification and distillation for you. So feel free to go any one of them. What I miss? Oh, I see. It's like where's water? The lab is there. We have 2 labs actually. 330 soda and Sucharja dye. It's harder to get card key access to Sucharja dye, but we actually can get you access to 330. So meta note for the TAs. TAs, make this note, please. That's for Brian, but Let's make sure the students have access to 330 soda all 24/7. Let's make 330 soda as the same as the downstairs lab so they can get access all the time. Even though it's locked, you should all get card key access. Make sure that happens. So please, TAs, make a note of that. Enrollment, please. I looked on the enrollment list, and there were 25 people on the waiting list before the addition of the new section. Section holds 33, so we're set. In theory, we all can fit, okay? It may be that there's only 30 seats and there's 33 people in the lab, but people get sick and then they'll show up and they'll drop, so it'll work out, I think. So the answer is it's all going to work out. That said, we are going to be very strict about the enforcement prerequisites, so you need to know your C, your Java, or your C++ before you come in. Question? That's correct. No, you can't go to any lab. Can't go. Lab's the one that we're constrained on the size of that. Discussion can have 50 in the room, people sit on the floor, I don't care. But lab is critical that we have not, that's why there's a swapping thing in Piazza, which we talked about. Okay? Sorry? No, we shouldn't have any problem at all overlapping labs because, as I said, we just added a new section that covers everybody. So it's the biggest 621C in my history that I've ever been. I've been here 10 years. I've never seen 621C this big, which is awesome. Computer science is back, folks. We love it. Look at the sort of doors lock at 6:30 and look at the website and Piazza often. If you're not on Piazza, this is, again, for those who missed it, go to piazza.com, sign up for 621C, make sure you're there. I added everybody who was on the wait list and this about 2 weeks ago, so you're all should be automatically added, but if somebody added this late, you should know about that. I supervised 2 awesome decals. People often remind me to mention that. They're amazing. They're student-run. Decal means student-run courses. UC Bug to learn how to make a Pixar film, and MS-DOS-X to learn how to write an iPhone game or iPhone app. Ka-ching. So now, let's talk about options. So sign magnitude, don't like it. Circuitry too hard. The odometer does the wrong thing, right? 2 zeros, don't like it. So how about this thing called one's complement, which is really quite interesting. Rather than having a dedicated bit, what you do is you have all the numbers that start with a 0 are positive numbers, like before. When you ever want to negate it, you just flip the bits. It's kind of an interesting idea. So let's play with this now. So again, 0 to, the nice thing is the first 16 numbers are the same so far, right? All zeros to 0 and one nibble of ones is 0 through 15. So that's the same here as you count up in your odometer. But now watch what happens as you count up. Watch. Go up, and then look at that. You wrap from the small side and you come up. We love it. We're almost there. You can see the engineering process here. I'm showing you the problems and how we solve one by one with different representations. I love it, right? And these are really cool. I'm thinking of numbers as different things. So 0 through 15, and then minus 16 to 0. Okay? So here's plus 7. Minus 7 is just the opposite of that, and that's pretty cool. I'm sorry, that's minus 15. That's minus 15 because you're just flipping it. You end up having, you can't go to the minus 16 because you have the double zeros, which cancels it out. So you have to be symmetric. So you have the same number of positives and negatives. But the problem is, what's minus 0? All ones. You still have 2 numbers sharing this. You see this right here? This is still the problem, right? You still have 2 zeros. So we're so close. Can you guys think of a way to fix it? Take the bottom and move it over. Ta-da! I give you about shortcomings of this. By the way, I skipped a slide. Shortcomings of this, obviously 2 zeros. We don't like it. So this is how we do it. It's called 2's complement. Okay? And the way you get the bottom shifting over is really cool. To make the complement, to make the negative number, you invert, right? And then you add 1. And that effectively takes the bottom set and moves it to the left. Okay? So let's play with it here. That means that all leading zeros is the same. The top doesn't change. But the negative side now always starts with a 1 if it's a negative number, and it shifts it over. It's called 2's complement, and in C it's called a short, long, long, or an int. So I think I missed a slide which said uint. If it's unsigned, you see this word uint. C99 has this cool way you can explicitly specify the width of these numbers. So C, I should move this way so you can see it, says int n there. So that's int with like int 8, int 16, int 32, int 64, etc. So here's the formula. Okay, let's start here. Minus 3 is, by the way, you can imagine that whatever system you have for negating should work inversely, right? So minus 3, if you negate that, you should get to 3. You negate that, you get back to minus 3 over and over, right? It should be a loop. It should never go to some other space. Otherwise, that's some crazy thing. So let's see. Minus 3 happens to be 1101. I haven't memorized that one. It's okay. So I said complement and add 1. So I complement, giving me 0010, and I add 1 to get 0011, which we know is 3. Now let's negate that one. Complement that, 1100, add the 1101, it's the same as the first one. So that's perfect, okay? So it works. Another way to think about it is this formula, which is you think of the actual bits you had. So I have some number of bits. The topmost bit is, by the way, if you think about the expression for how numbers work, it's like coefficients and some power thing, right? It's like if I have 5 bits, it's that topmost bit, or d sub 4 times 2 to the 4, plus d sub 3 times 2 to the 3, right? It keeps going like this, and times d to the 0 times 2 to the 0. That's how you represent any number, right? My address is 127. Well, that means 1 times 10 to the 2, right? Plus 2 times 10 to the 1, plus 3 to 10 to the 0. The same with binary numbers. But your way to do this Coos complement stuff is the most significant bit is times negative 2 to the 31. And it just works. For example, 1101, right? Which we know here is negative 3. Let's try it out. Well, 1 times negative 2 to the 3 plus 1 times, this is this one here, right? 1 times 2 to the 2 plus 0 times 2 to the 1 plus 1 times 2 to the 0. This gives me negative 2 to the 3, which is negative 8, plus 4 plus 0 plus 1, minus 8 plus 5 gives you minus 3. So it's another way of getting to it. It's all symmetric. It's kind of cool. There was a question here that was pending. Yes?
What's wrong with having 2 zeros?
What's wrong with having 2 zeros? It's a great question. The issue with having 2 zeros is, you have to compare against 2 things. It's a little bit annoying in circuitry to say, okay, I'm at 0. Is x equals 0? Well, what if I'm the other 0? What do you mean? Does that mean either one counts as 0, or you have to be the positive 0 or the negative 0 to 0? It's complicated, right? It adds this level. We don't like it. And it makes the circuitry much harder to build. So you end up having this hiccup where you keep going up by 1, and incrementing either does it or wraps until I get to 0, which is a minus 1, 0, 0. So it's this weird thing where I end up skipping and kind of staying in its place. It's like we don't like it. We don't like it. Okay? Mostly it's about circuitry not being easy to build, to be honest. And the math isn't very clean, so that's part of it too. Oh, by the way, here's something interesting. You guys seen this picture before? Is that 2 faces or is that a vase? Answer is both, right? Depends how you look at it. So how do I know, by the way, that this is minus 3? I can look at that and quickly say it's minus 3. Why? Because I do the inversion in my head. I pretend a 0 is actually a 1 and a 1's a 0. So in my head, I'm looking at this top number, 1101, and I'm reading it as, in my head, 0010. Does that make sense? And then in my head, I'm going, add 1, that's a 3, but I was doing it in my negative world, so obviously I was looking at a negative 3. Does that make sense? So I'm looking at this, counting every 0 is 1, every 1 is 0, which means I'm doing this second step in my head and saying, add 1 to that, okay, that gives me 3. Therefore, that's negative 3. And I feel very smart looking at a negative number saying quickly negative 3. Okay? So think of that as the reverse if that helps you. Here, I love this graphic for me. This graphic for me helps drive this home, which is there's this number line, which is like a clock. It's like a circle. So when it wraps in the same beautiful way that 12 o'clock just wraps to 1, to 1, which wraps to the 2, 3, 4, 5, to 11, back to 12, back to 1 again. It's a beautiful thing. So the kind of overflow naturally just wraps here. And the nice thing is, because I have no duplicate numbers, I don't have to worry about having 2 dashes and it's all complicated. It's just all perfect, they're all seamless, and it's there. So here, let's look at this. Again, watch what happens. I climb up as my odometer climbs, and boom, it's perfect and no overlap. It's beautiful. I have harmony in the world. There's it's beautiful. Everything's happy. So let's think about it. What's really happening is I'm starting at 0, and I'm counting up to 15 like I did for every single representation. Notice the first 16 bits, the first 16 positions were the same for everyone. Unsigned, signed magnitude, 1's complement, 2's complement, all the same. It's always the first, all 0s to 0 and all 1's is always the same. Okay, it's 0 to 15 in this case. The only difference is, rather than copying, I wrap down to minus 16. So what's interesting is 2's complement, which is the natural way that if you say float, or, that's that. If you say int, take the float away, go back in time. If you say int in C, int in Java? Int in Java, right? Yeah, I've been a while since I've my Java. Int, Python, by the way, is so much more fun than Java. I need to say that, because I've been a Python guy for a long time. Okay, so I say int, this is what's happening. I have one more negative number if I say int than I have positive. It's exactly this. What's cool is I'm explaining how we've engineered it. When you've been programming for ages, if you've ever done, remember, requirements so that you know what ints are because you've done those 3 languages, you now know that I have one more negative number than positive. It's kind of cool. And you can see, if you kind of add to it, Sometimes the systems have, depending on what you have, they'll either trigger overflow or not, but it's kind of cool that you take the biggest negative number and add 1, and actually subtract 1, and you get to the biggest positive number. They wrap together naturally. So anyway, minus 16 wraps around, you get to minus 1, all ones, minus 1, and then bloop, you get to 0, and it's just seamless. That's exactly what you saw in the lower picture, but it's kind of a whole new idea. So we like the idea. Remember 2 things we want. We don't want 2 zeros, and we don't want to go in opposite directions on my number line, right? Okay. Is there another way of thinking about it? And the answer is there is. Check this out. It's called a biased encoding. Double E's know about bias, which basically says I have some AC amount, which is going to wiggle, and I have some DC amount, which is kind of the constant voltage I have. And it's kind of like the constant. I have some signal plus a constant. That's my bias. So a bias is like I'm biased against it. You say something to me, I'm biased against liking comedy. So whatever you say, I like this movie, well, I'm biased for comedy movies, so then, therefore, if it's not a comedy, I'm not going to like it. I'm already biased. I've already added my plus comedy number to my reception of your comment. So that's a plus comedy thing. I don't know what that is, but I'm going off on a crazy thing. So a bias here means every number you get, I subtract or I add my bias. I add the bias to the number to say that's the number I really mean. I'll try it again. If I have a 0, you give me all zeros. So, Dan, you hand me all zeros. My odometer, what does the odometer say? All zeros. What's my bias? Minus 15 here. So therefore, the actual mileage I have is minus 15. And only when my odometer reads 15 do I add the minus 15, I get a 0. Does that make sense? So let's look at it. So what's actually cool about it, watch this. Watch how nice this is. Watch my animation. It's like I start there and go over. Rather than starting at 0 is 0 and going there, I actually start at 0 is the smallest number I have. In a way, we like this. This, in some sense, makes a lot more sense to some people, in that all zeros is the smallest number you have, happens to be negative, and I just keep incrementing. Minus 1, plus 1, that's seamless, right? It's quite nice. So actually, bias, for many people, makes more sense than this 2's complement, weird complement thing. No, I just start at the 0 is the smallest number I get, and I move up. What number is it here? The only little catch, if you remember, it's a little bit tricky to get you there. The smallest number is a minus 15, because obviously the bias is minus 15, so therefore when it's 0, it's minus 15. So now in the biased encoding, I have one more positive number than negative. It's a small little detail, but that's kind of an interesting piece of it. Okay? So I get more positives and negatives, more positive negatives by 1. There's the bias. And in general, this is the rule. This is the key rule, by the way, for how the bias is chosen. This bias, minus 15, was not a random number I threw out there, even though in theory you could have any bias. Right? In theory, I just want to have this, but I want to have the equal number of negatives and positives close to it, right? So really the only choices are really minus 15 or minus 16, because I want to have an equal number of these guys. So it's one of those two. We happen to choose minus 15. I don't know why. To be honest, I mean, I know a little bit know why, but it would have been almost made more sense to say minus 16, and then it's the same as 2's complement in terms of what you have, right? So it's a little bit, I should reread this, why they actually chose that. So it's kind of cool, the odometer starts at the small side, starts at the high side. The downside is 0 is no longer 0, right? So that's a little bit difficult. It also means that there's a little bit more calculations. Students always forget, have I added the bias or am I subtracting the bias? No, I look at the digital representation, which is here. I take the bias, I add it, and that's the number I'm actually representing. So I have a 0, I have my bias minus 15, therefore I really have minus $15 in the bank, which means I owe you guys some money. All right, questions about bias. Bias is a little bit difficult. People usually haven't seen bias before this. And as far as I know, there's no way in code, in C, without you writing it yourself, to use a primitive which uses a bias representation. If you want negative numbers, you say int, and int is the 2's complement, that's what it does. Because really, they're no different. It's just how internal, it's like an abstraction layer, right? If I were to say, why would you have bias? The only difference of having the word bias in there would be that I get one more positive number in there. How the bits are inside is just below my abstraction level. I shouldn't care about that. So every time you're talking about a computer representing numbers, it's always 2's complement. Bias is another thing, which is kind of like it's an experimental way of doing things. It'll come up a little bit later. Okay? Yes, question. There's a question in the back. Did you see one? Yes, sorry. You got to wave your hand because it's really hard to see the back. Yes, go. No. You said add the bias to 2's complement. I have some odometer. And I take the bias and I add that to it, and that's the number I'm representing. So the odometer reads some value. I add the bias, and I want to do that. Now, on the opposite side, I want to represent something. So let's say I want to represent 0. How would I represent 0? I have to subtract the bias from that here, and I get some set of bits, and that's what I have. So it's kind of the opposite, right? I add the bias to go from the odometer to the real number, and the opposite, I have the real number. I subtract the bias to get the actual encoding of the bits. It's a little complicated. Play with it a little bit. Play with this slide. This slide is all you need for that. Let's try to keep on. I only have 10 minutes, and I want to be able to have the question. So now we've got an interesting question. We've done positives. We've done negatives. We feel comfortable with all these 4 different representations, hopefully. You'll play with this, by the way, in discussion. If you have questions about this, let's bring up a discussion. We're spending the whole time to think about that. Here we go. How do I represent, like, not just negative 12, but negative 12 in some fraction of a number? Okay? So let's actually see what you guys think. By the way, before you vote, let me explain one thing. There's a shifting the binary point, which is like, what are you talking about? It's basically dividing by 2 or 4. So for example, here. So here's what am I doing here? 3, blah, blah, 2, blah, 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 blah. I'm missing something. What's that? This should be like a 1, 0. 3 equals that? What does that mean? Oh, yeah. No, wait, what? Did I get cut off over here? What's? Oh, it's 11. I'm sorry, base 10, 11. I missed the thing. I'm sorry. Base 10. Sorry. Okay, I want to represent 11. I got 11 pennies. Okay, base 10. And what is that? In binary, it's 1, 0, 1, 1, right? If I were to divide it by 4, what's 11 fourths? 2.75. So here's what I do. I just shift the binary point, which was after the 1, 1. I go divided by 2, divided by 4. And now I'm at 10.11, and it's exactly right. It just works. So remember how I told you that slide, addition, subtraction works? Guess what? Division works also. By moving the binary point, it was a decimal point, but now it's in binary, by that many points whenever I divide by a factor of 2. Every time I divide by 2, I move to the left by 1. Does that make sense? So 10.11 is this point. Watch this. This is so cool. This bit is the 2's bit. That bit is the 1's bit. That bit is the half's bit. That bit is the quarter's bit. What's a half plus a quarter? 3/4, 0.75. What's 1, 0? 2. It works. Is that cool stuff? Many of you are going, whoa, when the brain is like that. Okay? So, how would I do minus 12.75? Well, obviously, I could do 2's complement, but shift the binary point a small way. I would do bias, but shift it in some way. Or somehow I combine 2 things, or somehow I combine 3 things. And E is we can't do it at all. So really, I'm not just asking, by the way, about 12.75, but what would you do if you were making a system to represent all numbers like 12.75, right? Obviously, minus 12.75, I just use 1 bit. Is it 12.75 or not? Is it my pi? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how would you design a system to have all positive negative numbers, including fractional numbers as well. Ready? Go. I love this one. By the way, sometimes I ask questions that are trick questions for a point. So you go, oh, you got me, but you learned something about that, like my pi example. This may or may not be one of those things. I'm just throwing that out there. Can I see how many slides I have? Sorry. My last one? Oh, yeah, my last one. Good. I'm running time. Love it. Aren't the clickers great? I love it. $120. Come on, $120. Give me some love. All right. Talk to your neighbors. Go. You're not supposed to talk until you vote. But go. Neighbors.
As long as,
Do we have this section?
oh, yeah, we do. It's up top. The school notes it as section 20, even though we're calling it
10. Okay, but what times?
It is.
Oh.
Even announced names for you.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Go. Big notes on the board. Huge. Hot off the presses. I love it. All right. Okay, you've talked. And now you are voting again. Go. And as you see the lab appearing in the front, you're also going to TeleBears, and you're quickly switching into it. Okay. So voting first, focus on that, and then we'll focus on the hot off the presses information. Thanks to Brian for getting that information for us. And thanks to the staff to make it happen in short order. All right. Oh, 123, 126. Boy, we had a lot today. So you guys are getting your web clicker. Is the web clicker seamless? Are you guys having okay with time with that? The web clicker stuff? Anybody nods, thumbs up? Give me some thumbs up for people web clicking. Excellent. Good. Glad to hear that. Okay. So stop. All right. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you decide to do. Stop. Come on. Stop there. Sometimes it takes a second when you click stop. When you web clicker enable it, it's like bringing all the last data from the server over there. Okay. So that's why it takes a little bit of time sometimes to do that. All right. 137 voted. And we're about, wow, look at this. So I got mostly people, this is on the first, actually this is on the first one, but it's about the same. So what's fascinating, as you love it, right? We can't, obviously we can represent anything, so that E is definitely out. Now the question is it really A or B? Combination of two, why would you do two encodings if we can do it in A or B? But you're going to notice we actually use three separate encodings. When you say the word float X, it's three of the encodings I've taught you today are used for that. Isn't that cool? You know which three? Sign magnitude for the sign. It's bias for how big it is, and it is unsigned for kind of where it is in that how big it is piece. And the reason we do that is you want to be able to represent really small numbers and really big numbers. So you want to be able to have something that kind of grows. And by having an exponent and what we call the mantissa part, you end up having some resolution at the small numbers, resolution at medium-sized numbers, resolution at huge numbers, et cetera, throughout the whole process. And to do that, you actually you use three encodings. It's very, very clever engineering. Somebody got the Turing Award, which is the Nobel Prize in computer science, for that engineering of that. So it's actually impressive, and three encodings is actually the right thing to do because of a lot of analysis. In summary, we've seen lots of encodings. Unsigned, which is uint, two's complement, which is int. Those are the only two you really, really need 10 years from now. Nobody's going to care about one's complement or sign magnitude, aside from the fact that I mentioned that float has sign magnitude as part of the piece of it. Overflow numbers are big, computers are finite. Ain't no free lunch you saw there. And as a top point, which I don't think I said, but I really want to make sure you get out of this, we often make design decisions to make the hardware simple. This is a case where we gave up some of those encodings because the hardware gets more complex. And unsigned and unsigned and two's complement have the property that the hardware is really, really, really easy. What's actually a cool piece of it, I build a binary adder that adds unsigned numbers, and if I happen to feed in and interpret them as two's complement numbers, the adder doesn't change. So the same hardware that does unsigned still does two's complement. It's beautiful. It's about the not wrapping thing. It's really very nice. All right, that's the end of the lecture today. I'm ending a minute or two early. I'm going to have to run across campus every Monday and Wednesday to teach a class. My head TA is here. We have a new section, folks. I'm so happy we have a new section. We can't answer questions. Head TA will answer those if I can. Sorry about that. Answer them in discussion or Piazza. I'll get you on Piazza. Thanks, folks.